And just before we start properly, I just want to ask a question. Feel free to answer in your head rather than out loud. But how well do you control yourself? It's a searching question, isn't it? I'm sorry for a slightly heavier start to a sermon. How do you control yourself? For some of us, maybe we've struggled with addiction, we've struggled with habitual sin, we've had long-term struggles with control. For others of us, maybe we've convinced ourselves that actually how we act isn't actually an issue for us, despite how it wounds those around us and how it affects our relationship with God, and actually we've allowed ourselves to be deceived by our hearts. And we should pay attention to those consciences that we've been given by God, though they can be flawed, a really helpful tool. But yeah, how do we control ourselves? Someone asked in the last couple of weeks around church, can we not sin? And I think that's a great question, because it drives us to this towards this idea of self-control that we're going to dig into this morning. I'm going to base most of my thoughts on this one verse, although I'll be jumping around a little bit as we go on. Proverbs 25:28. It's the one proverb that explicitly mentions self-control. That doesn't mean that the concept isn't elsewhere through Proverbs. It is, and we'll get there later. But Proverbs 25:28 is where we're beginning and where we'll stick for a while. A man without self-control, a person without self-control, is like a city broken into and left without walls. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. This is one of these proverbs that it almost sounds like a parable, doesn't it? You could almost imagine Jesus telling this story. You have this idea of a walled city, a secure place, a refuge for times of trouble. It's not just a little hokey village out in the country that's at the whims of robbers and thieves and warlords. No. This is a walled city. Enemies can't take it without some serious fight, without a siege, without something going on. There's a level of control about what comes and goes, right? That's the imagery that we should have in our minds when we're thinking about this proverb. But what happens if that city is taken? It's broken into, it gets sieged down, it gets plundered, and the aggressors, they think, we don't want to have to deal with this again. Going to flatten the walls, level it, make it nice and easy next time when we want to come and gain our reward. It's no longer a safe place, is it? It's no longer secure. It's no longer the sort of city that you want to run to if you hear of trouble in the area. There's no longer control over what comes and goes. And the proverb shows us the image of that ruined city. And the author points and says, see someone without self-control? This is what you should be seeing when you look at them. And I don't think he's saying that as so get your best binoculars out to start looking at other people around you. I think it's much more aimed as a self-diagnostic tool. And if you're hearing that in isolation, maybe this is the first time that you've heard some teaching from the Bible or something like that, or maybe if you're like me and you struggle with self-control, and you see that disastrous picture of that city, and you think, hold on, that sounds a little bit extreme. Come on, that's a little bit much, isn't it? Maybe you think that it sounds a little bit like us working to impress God. We need to be super careful so that we maintain our lives, so that God will look at us and go, hey, good guy. Yeah, I'm going to reward you. But that's not what we're talking about. And we're going to dig into this idea of self-control today. And can I suggest, wherever we see ourselves on I don't know if there is such a thing, but the self-control spectrum, whatever our knee-jerk reaction is to this proverb, let's ask God to help us as we delve into this together. So let's zoom out to begin with, because I think there's something quite central about self-control in the book of Proverbs, but actually through the whole Bible and what it means like to walk with Jesus. And I think something we need to remember is the shape of our theology, and this maybe sounds a little bit air-fairy, but stick with me for 2 minutes. When we come to the Bible, when we come to God's Word, it reveals to us who God is, right? Even when it's on topics that maybe we don't think are about that. So when we come to the Ten Commandments, and we find at its core is how we're to love God and love one another, we actually find there a revelation of the sort of God that we're talking about. And when you're in the Old Testament and you're reading through like tabernacle building instructions and the Old Testament festivals and what the priests are to do, they show us in a very real way the God who we serve. A God who is holy and loving. The God who is glorious and utterly immense. And when we come to maybe the prophets and we hear his care for justice and holiness and his hatred of evil and sin, we see the God who we love in that. And even as we're going through Proverbs in the wisdom literature, we see people wrestling with how to suffer, how to deal with existential dread, how to deal with joy and sorrow and everything in between. And we see God in the wisdom of his counsel to us. We see God in those aspects of life. And a part of how we see God is that we don't take all of these different characteristics and attributes of God and pit them against each other. God is loving, and we stick that in a box over here, and God is just, and we stick that in a box up there, and we kind of go, I'm not quite sure how those relate. We'll just keep them in different little pigeonholes. No, we integrate these together. Because part of the God, that's a horrible way to phrase that, and if you know any theology, it's a terrible theology joke. Moving swiftly on. Part of the God that we serve is that he is a God who is simple. And by that I don't mean he's a nice little God that we can understand in an afternoon. It's something more than that. Simple is the word that theologians and Christians have used throughout church history to mean that God isn't made up of different little bits. He isn't made up of parts, is the theological way to phrase it. You can't dissect God. You can't take him into the laboratory and start kind of, there's his justice. We're going to pop that over in that little beaker, and there's his love. We're going to pop that over there. No, he doesn't have parts. And that sounds abstract, right? And we're talking about self-control, and now I'm on to the simplicity of God. And Tim, what on earth are you on about? I think it bleeds into this idea of self-control because we're made in his image, and it explains why things keep connecting. When we gaze at God's justice, we see his love at work in the world. When we gaze at God's holiness, we see his eternal beauty enshrined. And on and on and on it goes, his character connecting and interconnecting all of his attributes, so that we're drawn deeper and deeper and deeper into his glory. And as those made in the image of God, when we start leaning into who God is, we actually find that the Christian life is a little bit like that. You go to Galatians 5, and as soon as I said the word self-control, maybe this jumped to your mind as it did to mine when I was prepping this week. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there are no law. It's a fantastic little scripture, isn't it? And I'm sure you've heard it before, but did you notice the tense of one of the words at the start? It's not the fruits of the Spirit. It's not, here are all of the various ways that the Spirit might make you, depending on who you are and how your character is built. No, it's a singular fruit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. The Spirit at work within us grows a fruit of a beautiful character, including the character of self-control, but it's all actually integrated and connected together. Self-control isn't this little thing that sits on the edge and some of us go, oh yeah, I really like that. I'm a disciplined kind of a person. I love going to the gym, and that's my bag. And so when it comes to Christian life, I'm going to major on self-control. Thank you very much. Everything else, take or leave it. It's not how it works. And for those of us who maybe look at our characters and go, self-control, we can't just leave it out and go, oh, I'm going to major on love, and that'll be okay, because, that's much better. No, this is a common thing. And so this self-control, this enables us to interrogate our deceitful hearts. So that if we have walked in habitual sin, and if we've convinced ourselves that things aren't sinful, that deep down we know are, we can deal with that. We can restrain the impulses of our sinful flesh, which have been crucified with Christ. In other words, we're set free. We truly are free from the slavery to sin that existed before we were followers of Jesus. And that's an amazing truth. And the self-control that is the fruit of the Spirit, that is the attribute that Proverbs is talking about, that we find all the way through Scripture, it's not some weird, quixotic thing that you look at and you go, don't quite like that. It's the rubber on the road outworking of the freedom of Christ that we have in us. And that's amazing. And maybe you're not following Jesus this morning. Maybe this sounds completely beyond anything you've ever heard before. If that's the case, you might not quite have understood what Christianity is really all about. Because you've maybe heard that Jesus came to die for our sin. The reason Jesus came to die for our sin is because we were all born into a state of rebellion against God. We were all born in such a way that we were slaves to sinful nature. And if you don't believe me, I have a really simple test for this. Go for a week and don't break the 10 Commandments. It's only 10 rules, but don't break them for a week. Come back, tell me how you got on next Sunday, and we'll have a great chat. It's just not possible because our whole natures are enslaved to sin. And freedom is only available in Jesus Christ's death. The fact that God came in the flesh to die for our sakes, that shows us a little bit of the weight of what that is, doesn't it? He came to free us from that sin. by dying in our place, taking on himself our sin, giving us his righteousness. And he offers it to all of us. Any of us who would leave our rebellion, turn to Jesus and follow after him. And if maybe you're not sure where you're at this morning, chat with someone after the service. Come and chat to me. We'd love to work through that a little bit. But for those of us who are now following Jesus, in answer to that question that was posed a couple of weeks ago, can we not sin? Yeah, absolutely. We can not sin. We are able to not sin. Not that we'll ever live a sinless life this side of glory. John 1's pretty clear on that. If we claim to be sinless, we're deceived. But we are able to not sin. We're able to hold ourselves back. We're able to live in step with the Spirit, to walk free of all of that mess that previously we were enslaved to. And coming back to Proverbs, you might be thinking, you based all of this on one verse, Tim. Come on, you need to do a little bit better than that. Let me take you to two more. The first one is chapter 16, verse 32. Chapter 16, verse 32 of Proverbs. And here the author of the Proverbs, I think it's Solomon at this point, he's showing us the glory of self-control. You're hearing here from writings in the time when warfare and glory were just linked. You know, if you captured a city, you were a great guy. If you were part of the army and you were doing well, go on, you're strong. But hear what the author to Proverbs says. Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. He who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Like think of all those great old myths. Think of all the fables of old, Odysseus and Troy, and all those great stories that get made into these amazing Hollywood blockbusters. And you think, yeah, he's the main character. He's the guy who took the city. He's all right. He's all right. But have you seen Joe over here? Joe over here, he's amazing. He knows how to rule his own body. Like, he is top tier. Have you seen Eleanor? Like she actually is able to control her anger. Like, that's just outstanding. She's a real hero. And Proverbs 29:11 says it kind of similarly. You don't need to turn there. Proverbs 29:11, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. You hear that word wise man and you see this sage guy with a nice white beard, unlike my scrawny black one, but the long white beard, and you see this guy a little bit like Gandalf or maybe Dumbledore if you're into that sort of thing, and you think of that sort of wise guy and you think, oh yes, they would be sagely stroking their beard while holding back their spirit. I don't think that's the image that we're meant to be getting here. I think the image we're getting here is someone who is out on the building site being needled by a really annoying customer. And he's just holding it back. It's okay. This customer, they don't need it. They don't need to hear it. I don't need to give vent to my full spirit. Or maybe for some of us a little more real, some of you folks who have little ones, And it's just why, all day, and well into the night. And it's not Gandalf going, oh yes, wise questions, John. Go to sleep. It's okay. I'm not snapping. Not taking out our anger on the little ones. And maybe, like me this week, you're looking at this and you're thinking, nope, that's impossible. Nope, that just doesn't work. Tried it before. Tried it 1,000,000 times before. That just doesn't work, Tim. The reality is, it's called self-control, but it's not self-control. It's God's Spirit at work within us, controlling us. It's us as we walk closely to Jesus, as we hear from Him, as we speak to Him, even in those moments of crisis, even in those moments of utter frustration. And maybe the only thing you can do is in your head cry out with a single word of help. But in that moment, He gives the grace that you need to keep on keeping on. He gives you the opportunity to leave the room in the middle of that meeting so that you can go and speak to Him a little bit more fully and come back in His strength. It's not us by sheer force of our wills, mastering ourselves because look at it, we've got it all, we're great Christians, right? No. We are broken sinners, given Jesus freedom and righteousness. And in His strength, by His Spirit at work within us, we are able to conquer these struggles that come at us day after day after day. And 2 Timothy puts it really well, just as we wrap up. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. The Spirit of God gave us, for the Spirit of God does not make us timid. Sorry, I'm reading from a slightly different translation. The Spirit of God does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. Let me find that in the ESV. I think it's a little bit clearer here. Here we go. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. Isn't that amazing? He gave us a spirit not of fear. This self-control stuff. This isn't about us getting closer to God through sheer force of will, impressing Him with our goodness. No. He has conquered. He has dealt with our sin. And as well as dealing with our sin once and for all on the cross, He has given us a spirit, not of fear, not of terror, not of worry, but of power and love and self-control. And so we walk in fellowship with Him. We walk seeking His grace day by day by day by day. We walk in this step. And through this, He gives us incredible peace, doesn't He? As we wrap up this morning, we're going to share communion together. We're going to remember Jesus dying on the cross for us, giving us this freedom from our sin.